Stanley's accomplishments are incredible. An MBA, a PhD in physiology, graduating at the top of his class, a postdoc fellowship at Johns Hopkins University, and now a faculty position at Howard Medical School. And I have to say that But that PhD came from St. Louis University, so I'm extra proud of it. I have to get it in everywhere I can. And as I've heard Stan talk over the years, one of the reasons that he does so much public speaking and advocacy work is to not only share his experiences and perspective, but to also represent this large community of talented, intelligent, and high-achieving people who have also been or are currently incarcerated. The closing keynote address at this event always sets the tone for not just how we spent our time together, but how we leave and go back to our communities and think about where we are as a collective. There was no disagreement amongst our conversations with the planning committee that you were the person that we wanted to present this final talk. I'm proud to introduce my colleague and my friend, Dr. Stanley Andrisse, and his talk titled, Education Over Incarceration. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Stanley Andrisse.
All right, so I think I'm mic'd up, ready to go. I'm very excited to be here and sharing with you all. Last year was my first time coming to this conference, and it was just this eye-opening experience. And I'll tell you a little bit more throughout my talk of why it was this eye-opening experience. So to go from last year being my first time attending to this year being one of the plenary speakers is something that is an honor for me. So I thank the planning committee, and I thank you all for being here, attending. I know it's the last session. You may have to catch a plane here in a second, but I appreciate you all for sharing this space with me. So as was just mentioned, the title of my talk is Education Over Incarceration. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And as you can see, I have a beautiful baby girl pictured on the screen here. So my wife and I just welcomed into the world our first child, Ashlyn Odette Hope Andrisse. And I wanted to, open just because it's like a super cute picture and like, who doesn't? So that's obviously, and she's, already become this special part of me, and this holds this special place in my heart. And parents in the room all understand that. You've been told that if you weren't a parent, then you're told like they're gonna hold a special part in your heart. And it's, in just 3.5 weeks, I've already experienced that. But so I wanted to add it because super cute picture, place in my heart. But also for the idea of we must understand where we've come from to understand where we are going. And I thought a picture of my daughter might help me explain that a little bit as I go through the talk. And so her name, each one of her names are a little piece of my wife and I's past. And they explain a little piece of who she is. So Ashlyn is, that comes from my wife's sister, who my wife went through some difficult times growing up. I won't really go into it, but her older sister more or less played the role of her mother. So this person holds a special place in her heart, and so we wanted to carry that on to our daughter. Her middle name, Odette, I'm Haitian. My family is Haitian, and we come, my family immigrated here from Haiti. and Odette is actually my mom's mom. And Odette, my mom's mom, passed away when my mom was only 2 years old. So my mom actually never met Odette. So this was an opportunity for my mom to meet Odette. And hope comes from the idea that, and I'm okay with sharing this because my wife is now like an advocate for this as well, and she speaks out on this all the time, so I'm not sharing any business that she doesn't know that I'm sharing. But my wife and I battled with issues of infertility. And interesting enough, I mean, as you might be reading as I'll tell you a little bit about myself, you know, I'm an endocrinologist scientist that studies reproductive endocrinology, and my wife was diagnosed with a condition called PCOS, which is what I actually study, but that's not like why we started dating or anything like that. But she's not like my test subject or anything. Like, we just found out she has PCOS. I've been studying it for a little longer than that. But we went through a lot of different struggles with bringing Ashlyn Odette Hope into this world. Her mom gave her this, you know, as we were going through this, her mom gave her this shoe to help her, you know, it was these little baby shoes. And she gave it to her to say, you know, this is something that you can hold on to as you're going through the struggle with infertility. And so she put it up in the bathroom, and like this was her source of inspiration. And one day she just happened to look inside the shoe, and the maker of the shoe was called Hope. And you know, so that was our piece of hope that we held on to. And so you know, we must understand where we've come from for us to understand where we're going. And we want to incorporate that into our daughter. And I'll also be talking about that throughout this talk. So moving into the talk, the first thing that I want to do, I want this to be kind of a discussion. So this is going to be an interactive discussion, and we are going to interact with each other. And I'd also like you to interact with the folks that may be not here as well. So throughout the talk, you'll see this little image pop up, and this is your opportunity. Or you could just do it at any point in the talk if you see something or hear something that you're interested in sharing with other people. You know, please continue this conversation. You know, we are in this place, in this space of talking about these issues. We spent the last few days talking about them. We're very intimately connected with these issues, but we all know that we need to be having these conversations in many, many spaces. So by sharing it, this gives the opportunity to continue the conversation. So you could kind of just follow the directions there if you guys are good at following directions. You know, get your phones out, use the wording, a couple of hashtags that you might want to use, and you know, we'll be able to continue the conversation online as well as in the room. A few more instructional things that we're going to talk about. Let's make sure this slide works, okay? We are going, again, this is going to be an interactive discussion, and the first interactive part of this discussion is for you to follow some more directions. So if you just Android or iPhone, you can text the wording that's listed up there and to 37607, and that will give you the ability to join this conversation. And then there will be more questions throughout the presentation, but you can easily just, you know, text, you know, lowercase or uppercase, you know, the different answers that will be presented on the screen. So this being the first one. So let's get our phones out, let's text to join, and let's answer this first question. Okay. 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 Man. Okay. So I should have hit it first. It's okay. Because there's this thing called groupthink. If you're like psychology, sociology type of person, once the group starts selecting one thing, no one wants to go outside of what the group thinks. So be your own independent person. Don't go with what the group thinks. So I'm not going to put the timer up, but I'll just put a timer here on my phone. So I'll need you, so now that you're you've joined the conversation, you don't need to, it'll still say text to join on every one of the questions, but now that you've joined, you don't need to text again to join. You just need to answer the question. So we'll be able to go through the other questions a little faster. So I'll give you all, and it also gives you the options if you want to change you could, I think, press clear and then go back and change your option if you're the indecisive. But for all the standardized testing, if you ever take a standardized test, you're never supposed to, go against your first thought. So go with your first thought. But you can clear if you want to change it. All right, so I think that time is up, and it looks like the majority of folks think I'm around 35 to 40 years old. So I'll wait to answer the question because we have another question so this is, how old do I look? And there's still some people that we just talked about the first response, and people are still over here, changing their mind. That's okay. So 37% say 35, 40, okay. The next question, so this is, how old do I look? And most people said 35 to 40. But this question is slightly different, actually, right? How old do you think I am? So how old do I look versus how old do you think I am? Okay, about 15 seconds. Oh, I got Facebook notifications popping up. Uh-oh, I'm not sure how to get rid of that. All right, so, okay. I got a few folks who think I'm 45. So that's interesting to me. So how old do you think I am versus how old do I look? Okay. So most people think that I'm older than I look. Is that what I got out of that? Is that what am I analyzing that correctly? Let me see. Let me go back. So, and people are still responding. Like, people are now changing their answers. You can't change your answer now. I don't have the stop button in this view, because this view we had to use doesn't allow me to have the stop button. But please stop. So people still coming in. But so I think most people, how old do I look? I look about 35, 40. But most people think that, wow, okay, 18, wow, man, okay. 21, got a 50 in there, okay. And then, how old do you think I am? 35 to 40-ish, maybe 45. Okay, and a drum roll, please, for the answer coming up. So, you don't need to know. So just, this is same, maybe ballpark, but very different, concepts, but, definitely along the same realms of thinking. I get this all the time. Like, why do you need to know how old I am, right? Most people are asking because it's like, you look so young. I get it all the time when I'm presenting, and, I'm a professor now and I present and my students think that I'm young. But if you think about it, I mean, this is a similar type of question that is only being used to prejudge me. You know, who cares how old I am? I'm here in front of you because just as, you know, Mary just told you all that I'm qualified to be here in front of you. And, you know, I jokingly bring that in, but I get it all the time about how young I am. But if you, I do want to bring into this framework of I'm here because I'm qualified to be here. And really, you know, I'm here as, you know, I'm going to share with you some of the different experiences that embody who I am. But the number one thing, as you kind of read through some of the things that I do now, I'm qualified to be here. And that's the number one thing that you should care about, is I'm here in front of you because I'm qualified to be here. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So before I go into talking about education over incarceration and what that means to me, I really wanted to talk to you, obviously, a little bit about my personal journey. And there's some context, you know, I have to always draw the frame. I know I'm sitting in front of an audience that knows the frame, but I feel it's important to always be on the same page. And so I'm going to spit out some numbers that you all are probably very much aware of, right? The U.S. incarcerates more people than any other country in the entire world, right? How many people, this is not one of the poll questions because I know you all know it, you know, we make up what percentage of the world's population? 5%. Yet, what percentage of the population of people locked in cages are locked in cages here in the United States? 25% of people locked in cages around the globe are locked up in cages right here in the United States. So we all know that, right? But we need to understand that and frame it and understand what it means. So what it really means is that as you've interacted with a number of people, it means a person like myself sitting in front of you and speak in this conversation with you, this qualified person to be here in front of you, but yet also this formerly incarcerated person is here in front of you. So as most of you are likely aware, if you kind of looked into the description of the talk, I'm a formerly incarcerated person with 3 felony convictions who was sentenced to 10 years in prison for drug trafficking charges. In my early 20s, I was sitting in a courtroom and a prosecutor was painting this picture of me as this dangerous threat to society, and she was successful in sentencing me as this prior and persistent career criminal. And her wording in doing so, she said that this person had no hope for changing the decisions that he had been making up until this time that he was in his early 20s. And again, you know, I'm now an endocrinologist scientist, an assistant professor at Johns Hopkins Medicine, an assistant professor at Howard University College of Medicine, a visiting professor at Georgetown University Medical Center, an executive director of a nonprofit. I would say that I probably changed just a little bit from what this prosecutor was saying. But yet, in many ways, I'm standing here in front of you in chains still. You know, even despite all of those layers of accomplishments, I presently still have barriers in my life. And we'll talk a little bit about these barriers, but I want to again kind of take you on this journey, my educational attainment journey. So I grew up in Ferguson, Missouri, and in my earlier days, I made a number of poor decisions, as we're all probably familiar with, right? Those poor decisions led to me being involved in the juvenile justice system. I was arrested for the first time at 15 years old. I started selling drugs in my early teen years. I was in and out encounters with the criminal justice system, even as a teenager. By the time, again, as I just told you, I got to my early 20s, I was sitting in this courtroom facing 20 years to life for drug trafficking charges. And as I just mentioned, I had by this time, those poor decisions had led to me having 3 felony convictions sitting in front of this judge. And, it was almost as if it was this out-of-body experience as I'm sitting here, this 20-year-old kid, and I have this prosecutor who's painting this Picasso picture of me as this dangerous threat to society, right? And, I'm sitting here listening to her say that this person needs to be thrown away for life. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm 20-something years old. As we just kind of went through with the age thing, somebody said, I currently look like I'm 18 or 21 years old, right? And this was many, many years ago. So you can imagine what this 20-year-old kid looked like when he was sitting in that courtroom. Yet this prosecutor was prophesizing that I was going to be a career criminal for the rest of my life, and she was hoping to throw me away for life because I had no hope for change. So I was eventually, as I mentioned, sentenced to 10 years in prison. And if I could even step back a little bit to one of the convictions that I had. So I was under investigation for 9 months before this 50-man DEA raid that resulted in one of the convictions that I have. For most audiences, when I ask them this question, no one really probably can say yes to it, but this audience might be a little bit different. But how many of you have ever had 50 assault rifles aimed at your head? I could have very easily been Mike Brown laying there dead in the streets, and all they would have really said was, oh, another young black thug selling drugs dead in the streets. Who really cares? Black lives don't matter, right? Just another dead young black thug. What is he ever going to amount to, right? What could he possibly ever amount to? We don't need him in this world. He wasn't going to do any good. When it was all said and done from this raid that dropped down on us, there was 5 of us that got popped, that got hit up. 3 of us were black, 2 of us were white. The 3 of us that were black all ended up in prison. The 2 white guys never stepped foot in a prison cell. So I guess this prosecutor may have, possibly seen some hope in their whiteness, but for me, I was hopeless. So, now, I'm sitting in this courtroom in this out-of-body experience. I have this person telling me that I'm this, she's laying out all these terrible things that I've been doing since I was a teenager, and selling drugs and carrying guns, and I'm sitting here almost, in this out-of-body experience, taking this all in, and I get sent away to 10 years. And in the courtroom, I have my family sitting there, hoping that I'm not going to get sent away to prison. And once the 10-year sentence is, once they tell me my sentence, I ask the judge if I can go hug my mom before I get sent away. And she denies me the opportunity to be a human and hug my mom, who is bawling that her baby son was being sent away to 10 years in prison. So instantly, my humanness was taken away. And as this 20-year-old kid, I know now that I'm a professor who works with 25 to 30-year-old folks who are practicing and studying to be medical doctors. I know now that the brain isn't even fully developed until about the mid-20s, right? And yet, I'm working with these 25 to 30-year-old kids or adults or whatever you want to call them, these 25 to 30-year-old folks who are training to be doctors. And if you juxtapose the idea that we don't call them, they have still another 16 years or so before we start calling them professionals, before you want them to cut you open, right? They have to go through fellowships and all these other things before we call them a career professional. Yet this prosecutor was prophesizing that I was a career criminal at 20 years old when I've only been practicing crime for, like a couple years. How am I already a career criminal? But yet, that's what she labeled me as. And so I went into prison, again, this 20-year-old mind that's not even fully developed yet, that's very mendable, right? I went into prison truly believing that I was this career criminal. And I went into prison, she laid out all of these examples of how terrible I am. I went into prison feeling and knowing that I was really this terrible person, and I was just gonna continue this cycle of incarceration, because then I got put into a place of who everyone else was told pretty much the exact same thing, that they were terrible people, that they were never gonna be changing the decisions that they had been making, because the system tells the prosecutors to do that. This prosecutor is now a judge, and she's a judge because she was in this county. For the folks who are from St. Louis, this particular case was in a town called St. Charles, which is primarily white. So you got this black kid from North St. Louis that's coming out to this primarily white area and selling a bunch of dope. We need to X that motherfucker out for life, right? And that's what she was doing with a lot of other people. So she got to be a judge because on her resume, there was, we're always looking for resume boosters, right? Like I do a training program, we're helping people with, just one sentence lines that show that you're really cool and you can really do what you're doing. Their one sentence line to show that they're really qualified is, I've sentenced 500 years of incarceration, right? That's what makes them look good, is that they've sent a bunch of people to prison. And in order to do that, they have to tell people like me that I'm worthless, right? Because they need to convince someone, the judge or a jury, that I deserve to go away for life. So she needs to show them that I'm worthless. So I went into prison, as do many people, as I found out most people, being told that I was worthless. And then also, as with most people, we're in that very young age, so very mendable. It took a long time to break this psychological thinking of being worthless. I was fortunate enough to have this mentor step into my life who saw something different in me. He saw this potential that I didn't even see in myself. And he started investing in that potential. Another key factor of how I started to break this psychological thinking of being worthless, while I was incarcerated, almost immediately from when I became incarcerated, my father's health began to plummet. And over the course of about 2 years, he went through probably 30 different surgeries where they started amputating his toe, then his foot, then his other toe, then half of that foot, then 30 surgeries later, they've amputated him all the way up to his torso, where he's literally half the man that he was. And for me, this was emotionally devastating to be in this tiny prison cell, which was beautifully depicted last night. Not, incredibly depicted. I don't even think you can really tie the word beautiful, but of the gentleman last night, which a quick shout out to all of the folks who shared last night at open mic. That was, incredible. But there was one of the gentlemen that was explaining what a prison cell is, and he put a chair down and he showed that, this is your toilet, this is your, this is what the sink is, and he explained the inhumanity that takes place in these tiny prison cells. So I'm in this tiny, inhumane place while they're literally ripping my father to pieces. And it was emotionally devastating for me. But I turned this this devastation into this inspiration to want to know more about what was going on with him. So I reached out to this mentor that had stepped into my life, and I asked them, what is diabetes? Like, I know it's like high blood sugar, but like, what is it really? Like, how does he was a healthy individual before I went away, and now he's, how does diabetes take someone from this place to that place? So I wanted to learn more about what was going on. And this mentor of mine started investing in my potential. So he was not an endocrinologist, which is, where I eventually moved on to being, but he started sending me these articles on diabetes. And if anyone is familiar with scientific articles, you're familiar that every other word is some word that you've never heard of before, right? And so I'm in prison trying to read this, and I go into, I go into my little lock box, and I pull out my dictionary. I'm like, where the fuck this word at? Like, they ain't got this. Where's this word at? These little bitty tiny dictionaries have 0 of the words that were in these articles, right? So I had to, again, this mentor invested in me, literally his time and his money. He would put money on my books, and spend hours with me going through these articles. And my curiosity and desire to learn more about endocrinology was sparked through this mentor and reading these articles in prison. So after 30 surgeries, 2 years of pain and agony, my father fell into a coma and lost his battle with type 2 diabetes. And this was just something that was, again, this emotionally devastating experience for me. But tied with this, with my mentor again, and him planting the seed that I have this potential that I had, he was in the process of helping me rewrite my story, and he convinced me into believing that I could somehow pursue higher education. So when it came time for me to come home, we put together a number of applications to places of higher education, of programs of higher education. And if you're familiar, just as we had these difficulties with getting these 30-page scientific articles, where he literally had to break down, because if you're familiar with prison, you can't have most of them. There's a page limitation, so he had no idea about the page limitations. This was a professor, and I'll tell you who he was here in a second. But he had no idea about prison rules. So the first few times that he was sending me these scientific articles, they kept bouncing back, and he's like, what's going on? It'd be weeks before I got a chance to actually talk to him on the phone. But it was the same way with these applications. I tried to get these big application packets, they couldn't come through. So I actually had to have people, him and some others, helping me put these applications together. And what seems for most people, they could just go online and finish an application overnight. It took me 6 months to put together each one of these applications. And almost instantly, rejection, 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 rejection. I mean, it was something that was just devastating. After pouring all this energy into applying to these different programs, and rejections coming overnight, it's like, did you even read it? Fortunately, this mentor of mine was a professor at the one institution that offered me a second chance. So I was accepted into the program where this mentor of mine was on the admissions committee, and that university, as Mary just pointed out, was St. Louis University. St. Louis University offered me my second chance. This mentor invested in me and offered me a second chance. So when I was given that second chance, what do you think I did with it, right? I'll step back again to another situation to give you a mindset of what I might have done with that. So when I was 19, I'll take you back to a time when I was in Texas, and I was picking up 100 pounds of dope, and I walk into this hotel room, and I'm meeting up with my guy. He's a Mexican guy, and he's got his 2 friends with him. And I walk in the door, I dap him up, and I'm like, yeah, I'm excited about this 100. I'm about to get this 100 packs, and so I'm dapping him up, And I know him, and the other two guys I don't really know. And they're two Mexican guys as well who don't speak any English, and one of them is sitting at a table with a sawed-off shotgun sitting in his hand, looking me directly in the eye with the 100 pounds of dope sitting right next to him. And I just come in and I dap my friends up, and I'm like, yeah, let's get this going, right? I've looked some crazy shit in the eye, and it didn't, the type of, calm, cool, and collectiveness that it takes. When I got to the point of being at a dissertation committee, and I'm talking to my friends, and they're like, aren't you nervous about this dissertation? Like, that professor's gonna eat me alive. And I'm like, nah, I think I'm good. So, when I got into that environment, I was hungry for change. I was thirsty for change. And as Mary pointed out earlier, I ended up finishing at the top of my class. I ended up getting my PhD and my MBA. I ended up finishing in 4 years in a program that generally takes about 5 to 6 years. And it wasn't because I was like super intelligent, I was just hungry. My work ethic is different than my peers was. My experiences are very different than what my peers were, right? And this is something that I see with everyone that has been given this opportunity. From the folks that I work with to folks that I know in similar situations, they have this work ethic that is very different than their peers. So I end up moving to Hopkins. I'll skip all the information on the challenges that I faced there. Then I eventually moved on to Howard University, and as I mentioned, I'm now an assistant professor, a tenure-track assistant professor at Howard University, and an adjunct professor at Johns Hopkins, and this visiting professor at Georgetown University. So I come back to this idea of we must understand where we came from to understand where we are going. So we must understand our journey to really understand where we're going. We must understand even further beyond our journey to things that happened even before we were here, to things that happened before even our parents were here, right? To understand where we are going. And to tie this idea, and I was, I'm thinking like, how can I really tie this idea? And it really can't be tied any better than the words from Glenn Martin, who was the founder of an organization called Just Leadership. Those closest to the problem are closest to the solution, yet often furthest from resources and power. Those closest to the problem are the ones closest to the solution, yet often furthest from resources and power. That's about understanding where we came from, right? We need to amplify the voices of people like myself, right? We need to amplify the voices of people who are qualified to be standing here in front of you, who are also formerly incarcerated. We don't need to just put them up here because they're formerly incarcerated. We need to put them up here because they are qualified to be up here. We have folks that are qualified, not just because I'm formerly incarcerated, you want to hear this story of how I got here. You can forget all that stuff. My qualifications put me here, right? So we are in a position where we have formerly incarcerated people who are qualified to be in these leadership roles, and we need to be placing them in those leadership roles. So again, we all know about mass incarceration. We all know about these statistics, but I want to really point out, things that we already know, right? But tying into this idea of those closest to the problem or closest to the solution. So who are those people that are closest to the problem? And these statistics, again, are probably nothing that you don't know, right? Our system, which has 2.3 million folks who are locked in cages, is primarily folks of color, right? It's primarily people of color. It's primarily men of color, right? That's not to exclude any other type of person who has been formerly incarcerated, but we have to understand who are the biggest population of those closest to the problem, right? And make sure that we understand that those population of people who are the majority of the people closest to the problem are standing right here in front of you, right? Another telling statistic that was thrown up here, and these statistics, most of them I cite where they're coming from. These particular ones are coming from the Sentencing Project, but there's, this interesting idea of, incarceration being this thing of poverty. But, one of the things that, if you tease out the statistics of incarceration, you'll see that there's nearly as many people of color who were not below the poverty line that are incarcerated than there are white people that were in poverty or not in poverty. So it's not only a thing, incarceration is not only a thing of poverty, it's really a thing about people of color. But this is no surprise to this audience, right? But again, to make sure that we're on the same frame, that we see the picture, we can't have a conversation if we're looking at a different picture. We think we're looking at this one and this person thinks they're looking. We need to be looking at the same picture and understand that we're looking at it. We could perceive it differently, right? But we need to make sure that we're looking at the same picture. Again, stuff that you probably know, does incarceration work? No. This audience doesn't need to know that. Incarceration really has not worked. It's particularly ineffective about certain crimes, most of them being that youth crimes. Again, we're throwing kids in prison. As I mentioned to you, most of you said that I look 18 to 21 years old, which I'm like, okay, I kind of take it. It's a good compliment. But, if you think back, that I look probably like I was 12 years old when I was, 20 years old sitting in that courtroom, and they were trying to send me away to life. And, when I think back to myself, it's crazy to think that my 10-year sentence was a blessing. It's crazy to think that there's somebody with the potential that I have to be a professor at Johns Hopkins Medicine, Howard University, and Georgetown, who is sitting in a cage locked up for the rest of their life because they weren't fortunate enough, as I was, to get a 10-year sentence. That's crazy. We're locking up kids. We know this, though, right? And we know that locking up folks for drug crimes is particularly ineffective. This is something that this audience probably doesn't know, but again, understanding the picture. And then the idea of people aging out of crime. There's, I really want to move to a space where we shouldn't be sending folks away to prison if they're under 25 years old. I was just talking to my wife about this, and again, I've shared, people are asking, people always, I have this 3.5 week, I always mistakenly say like month or year, but she's only 3.5 weeks, right? And people ask me, what does it feel like to be a dad? And I'm telling them how incredible it feels. And one of the things that I share is that I usually envision, like these proud dad moments, like kindergarten and the first day of school and like graduations and, dance recitals and all this type of stuff, like as being proud dad moments. And I never thought that I would have a proud dad moment in just, 48 hours of her life. We believe, me being this reproductive endocrinologist and really big on diabetes and health and fitness. So, we're breastfeeding baby Ashlyn, and, breastfed babies actually lose a little weight during that first 24 hours. And there's a percentage of weight that they want them to be able to lose, and they don't want to go over that. So Ashlyn went a little bit over that. So when my wife got sent home, Ashlyn didn't get sent home. And, this was like, oh my God, like we're new parents, we're all like worried about like what's going on. So the next day we're like feeding her 5 bottles at a time, and we're trying to fatten her up a little bit. And when they finally put her on the scale and she weighed the weight, we're like, yeah, that's my girl right there. This like proud dad moment in just 48 hours. I would have never expected it to be that quick that I'd start having these proud dad moments. Another proud dad moment is, I'm now reading about babies and stuff, because I thought I knew a lot, but I really don't. And, they're saying that, babies are, like she's now like being able to roll her head and like she's showing more strength as we're swaddling her and she's busting out. And these are all like developmental things that I'm like proud of, like she's getting to. And one of the developmental things is that they said that, the babies at one point in time, about 3 weeks, so about right now, she's starting to discover that her arms are attached to her. So she's literally like, holy shit. Like, whoa, that's my arm. Like, I didn't know that was. So the brain literally hadn't developed yet to tell the body that it was connected. So the brain hadn't developed yet to tell the body that the body parts were connected. This is the same exact thing for a 20-something-year-old. The brain is not fully developed, and particularly the decision-making parts of the brain. So we're sending people away that literally can't see their arms, right? They literally can't see it. The brain has not developed to that point yet. And we're sending them away for life in prison. And these people could possibly be professors at Johns Hopkins Medicine, Howard University, and Georgetown University, right? And we're sending them away for life in prison. When the data shows the brain is not fully developed until the mid-20s, and that most people, because the brain is not fully developed yet, most people stop making those types of poor decisions that would land someone in a cage when they get above that age. So for me, it's just like, it's so simple. Like, why are we not moving to this space where we shouldn't be incarcerating folks if they're under 25 years old? We just should not be incarcerating anybody. If they're under 25 years old, they cannot see their arms. They cannot see that the decisions that they're making are not really the greatest decisions. But in just a couple of years, they will be able. My baby, just in 3 weeks, she's like, holy shit, this is my arms, right? Just give them some time. But again, I'm talking to an audience that kind of knows this stuff, right? So this idea of education over incarceration, I'm really big on metaphors and double entendres. And, I was forced to get up on open mic last night and, share a little bit of artistic talent. And really, it's funny that, I talked to one of the folks who also shared, and I was telling him how dope what he shared was. And he was like, sometimes, I get a little nervous on the mic, and I saw that you were kind of hesitating, but I was like, no, I wasn't nervous or anything like that. I told them specifically that I would, if there's nobody going up, like I would try to go up to make sure there's people going up, but there was plenty of people going up, and it was incredible, as I mentioned last night. But, what I shared to him was that, I'm actually an introvert, and I understand as an introvert that sometimes silence is needed. Right? So to give people the time to process, and sometimes that silence is helpful. So I was like, that was actually like incorporated into what I was trying to do. Like I was silent for the incorporation, but this idea of metaphors and double entendres, and this idea of education over incarceration, what we know is that incarceration does not work, right? We just explained, I just gave some examples, just a few, of why incarceration doesn't work. But again, with more statistics, we know, all of us in this room know that education is something that is working. And for me, how I see this vision, and I tie this in, being an endocrinologist, I see it from a health lens, actually, and my vision as having this culture of health is one of inclusivity, equal justice, and equal educational and employment opportunity for everyone, right? And I come at this from a unique lens, right? And again, that's part of why we need more people, not only like myself, but just qualified people who are impacted people sitting in the space. But my lens is very different, right? I'm coming at this from a very different lens from a lot of different people who are experts in this field. But we need those different lenses. We need people to see it differently. We need people who are closest to the problem, right? We need people who are closest to the problem in leadership positions. We need them with the resources to be in leadership positions, right? And that's how we're going to tackle these issues of disparities and inequities that are involved in our legal system. So how I see it changing is, again, there's some statistics that some of the folks in the room are probably likely familiar with. There was this, everyone I feel like in this space references this particular study here that was done by the RAND Corporation that shows that, obtaining higher education is reducing recidivism by 43%. We understand that it's also 4 to 5 times less costly to send someone to college than it is to put them back in prison. That's all stuff that we understand, right? Education is providing the opportunities for people with criminal records to move beyond their experiences with the system. It's, furthering one's education is not really just healthy for the individual, it's healthy for that individual's family, it's healthy for that individual's community, it's healthy for everyone in the community, right? It makes sense. Education over incarceration makes just clear sense. Incarceration is not working, education is clearly working. What do we need to do? We need to probably do a little more of that, right? Because, I always get in this conversation. I'll talk a little bit about the organization that, in the program that I run, but I have these conversations with, funders and partners, and, a lot of people are of this, perception that once someone gets out of prison, they need jobs, and they need to put food on the table. Right? There's 3 main pillars that most people will consider reentry, and that's housing. You can't even get out of prison a lot of times unless you have a housing plan. There is mental health assistance and drug use assistance, and then there's workforce development. And then if somebody gets through those and they go through a workforce development program and they get into an entry-level position, the reentry field throws their hands up like, touchdown, we've successfully helped this person reenter into society with their $8 an hour job, and they're putting food on the table. It's a tough conversation. If you can imagine when someone truly believes that, and you're trying to get them to understand that we need to have a 4th pillar, and that 4th pillar needs to be working in conjunction immediately when someone gets home. And that 4th pillar needs to be the continuance and pursuance of higher education. But how are they going to be doing that when they need to get this job that's going to put food on the table? I think you're selling us short a little bit. We can handle it. And I think there's a lot of folks in the room that understands that we can handle that. And this is a great social media opportunity, right? I told you that you'll see a few of these. This graph is, and we'll talk, I have a few data points from this particular study that just came out from PPI that shows that the amount, it's nearly impossible for formerly incarcerated job seekers to compete in this economy that's increasingly demanding higher skilled and credentialed workers. So back in, in the 1970s, a large percentage of jobs were available for these labor type of jobs, but those jobs are going away. The model of our system, of our society has changed. So to tell folks that they need to go into these types of jobs, when these types of jobs are going away, like, how does that even make sense? And so we're back to another poll question. I mentioned that this would be interactive. I talked a little bit. I want to ask a few questions. So If you could get your phones out, you should have had them out from that last slide because you should have been Facebooking. Maybe you're still Facebooking or tweeting. But if you could get your phones out and engage in this conversation. All right, about 5 seconds left. Just go with the first choice. This is not you're not gonna get graded or anything like that. So I can't hit the stop button, but if you guys want to just keep coming in with them, that's fine. We'll analyze as you come in. So it looks like people are saying, what is the percentage of formerly incarcerated people with GED or high school diplomas? And most people are saying about 25 to 33%. There's a few people that are joining in saying it's a little bit higher. Again, don't go with that group think. We went through the little session. You don't have to do group think. Be independent thinkers. Just go with your first choice. So we're gonna end it there. I guess I could kind of write these down, but I'll remember. So we primarily think 25% and 33%. So the next question, I'll put that in my phone. The next question is, what percent of formerly incarcerated people with any type of college degree? So about 5 more seconds. So what percentage of formerly incarcerated people with any type of college degree? It's almost like 33% split between 4, 8, and 15. So we say that it's primarily about 25 to 33% have a GED, and primarily split between 4, 8, or 15% have a college degree. So moving into the statistics that were just presented by PPI again, there's a link down there if you're interested. It was a pretty good study or article that just came out. So here are the statistics, right? Roughly 90% of the general public has GEDs or high school diplomas, compared to 75% of the incarcerated formerly incarcerated folks. So about 1 to 2-fold difference. We're almost there, right? And that's largely because the prison system, like when I was in Missouri prison, you couldn't exit until you had your GED or you were very near completion of that GED. So we've very intentionally stressed this idea of getting high school diplomas or GEDs for folks in prison. But if you look at the college statistics, 30% of the general population compared to less than 4%. That is nearly a 9-fold difference. So we go from only about a 1-fold, basically equal on the idea of high school equivalence, and then it's a near 9-fold difference in college education. What do you all feel about that? How does that make you feel? Literally, let's shout out some ideas of how that makes you feel.
That's great.
I'm gonna give some space for those introverts because I still want to answer.
Sound like you're punishing society.
Punishing society. Infuriating. Anger.
Well, it looks like the general public doesn't think a college degree is that important because it's only 30% of the college degree of the general public.
That's an interesting take.
The general public pushes for education for anybody else, but they're not even doing it for themselves.
That's a very good observation. I also think, we would, so I will be giving a presentation coming up at a conference called the PIAC, P-I-A-A-C, which is looking at global educational attainment and where we stand in that. And we are way, way down below. You know, and U.S. likes to be number one. We're number one in incarceration and a lot of other things, right? But we're not number one in education. We're way towards the bottom. So that gives you that's a whole different conversation. But that is a very legitimate observation.
Well, it also speaks to who we as a country think deserve wealth attainment and the way that college degrees are still attached to wealth attainment in this country. So who is it as a country that we believe is deserving of that?
And we are very intentionally keeping those folks because you see that we can match the amount of GED high school diploma attainment. You know, that takes dollars to do that. So they invest in getting that, so it's possible, right? And we all know that it's possible. And we all know that, you know, so we in this room, that question about where the focus needs to be, we clearly understand where the focus needs to be. We need to start getting people into this conversation so we can help them understand where that focus also needs to be. So in the study in this article, they break it down in another way. So they break it down to people who have obtained high school diplomas or GED and what percentage of that. And it's actually so the general public has a 1 in 3 chance of attaining a college degree. The general public with a high school diploma has a 1 in 3 chance of attaining a high school degree. Formerly incarcerated people with a high school diploma or GED have a 1 in 20 chance. So again, you know, another way to look at that same disparity that we just looked at. And there's clear that there's a lot of work to be done, and the folks in this room are the ones that are looking to address this. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that looks, but a few more questions that I want to kind of pose to the audience. So for this one, for the formerly incarcerated folks in the room, did your criminal legal system involvement prevent you from pursuing your major or career of choice? Man, we're not even gonna get to see the excitement of like all the different numbers coming in and changing. So I'll give about 15 more seconds. Okay. So again, this is something that it really depends, right? It depends what major or career was your choice. But for the majority of people, it has impacted what they decide is their choice, right? We can pretty much clearly agree with that. So moving to the next question, for program directors, how many majors are offered in your inside prison college program? Okay, so about 5 seconds. And, you know, clearly it looks as if, you know, most are offering around 1 if they're offering any. There's a few that are offering 2. And of course, this is a very loaded type of question. There's a number of reasons why and strategies why that may be. But, you know, just the clear understanding of what it is this is what it is. We won't go into the discussion about what those constraints and strategies might be to make this the case, but this is, you know, from this small pool of folks, I think this is pretty clear. I mean, if we had polled a larger group of folks, we'd likely still get similar type of results. Tie that, if we tie that in with the previous question that almost 100% of formerly incarcerated people say that they were unable to pursue the major or career of choice, and then we tie that in with the programs that we're offering are only offering a few 1 to just 2 majors, we really need to think about that of when we talk about offering the opportunities to the students, what we're actually doing. So some of the barriers, I've kind of hit on this, I won't really go into, I just wanted to mention them. There's a psychological piece that I talked about with how the system labels us, and it also is something that we ourselves start to perpetuate. There's the box. These are things that were talked about in the conference, so I really don't want to spend that much time on them. But Pell reinstatement, the FAFSA question, which also is tied to funds, and this idea of what I really want to talk a little bit more about is this idea of first-generation college students and this X on folks' back and the ability to navigate the actual college system successfully. And these are just, again, my thoughts on what a next phase of higher education in and after prison could look like. And I think, we need to be, one, promoting higher degree attainment. I think, this is not to say that some of the programs that are already being offered aren't doing some of these things. This is, again, some thoughts that I had. We need to be promoting smooth transition from in-prison to out-of-prison campus programs. So yesterday, I was on a Ban the Box panel, and Annie asked the folks in the crowd to raise their hand if they run college program, in-prison programs. And we had a good number of folks that did. And then she said, leave your hands raised. How many of you still have the box at your college? And almost all of the hands remained raised. So these are folks that these institutions believe in college inside of prison, but yet are still holding on to some of the barriers to education on their outside of college atmosphere. So that's something to think about. We need to, as these program directors and folks involved, we need to think of ways that we can make these smooth transitions. I know there's a number of programs that are already doing it. We need to make sure that we're moving to where most or all of our programs are doing that. So promoting degree attainment outside of the particular degrees that most programs offer, right? And that was that question of what percentage of folks formerly incarcerated are pursuing the careers of their choice, and most of them said that because of the system, they're not. And that question was, I wanted to add in there whether it was the system or whether it was other things that made you not be able to pursue that question, or pursue the major of choice. But regardless, there's a large number of people that are not pursuing their major of choice. And then there's a large number of programs that are only offering not very many programs of choices. There's not very many choices, right? Another thing so that's something to think about. We also need to be thinking about building coalitions and utilizing success stories to address this licensure issue. I'll talk a little bit about my program here in a second and ways that we're addressing that. And then we need to be moving to this model where students can pursue their innate passions, right? We need to change that number of formerly incarcerated people said that the system has impacted where they see themselves being. So what that answer says is that we are not letting people pursue their innate passions and talents. We're saying that this is probably going to work best for you. This is what society has set that they'll allow you to do. And instead, we have people's talents still boxed up. Even though they're doing fairly well, clearly, we're addressing that 8.5% or eightfold difference by giving them, helping them obtain college degrees, but their talents are still boxed in because they're really not pursuing what they want to pursue. So we need to start moving to a model where we can help folks pursue their innate talents and passions. And so, the program that we have going on called Prison to Professionals, we're looking to do some of those things that I just mentioned. And it's not really, again, on this idea of metaphors and double entendres. We're really not about helping people get PhDs or doctorates or professional degrees. We want to help people pursue their innate talents. We want to help people move into the space of reaching their full potential, and we want to use higher education to do that. We want to use leadership to do that. We want to use mentorship to do that. So we're investing in their potential with this blanket of support, resources, and tools to help them obtain what they want to obtain. And again, the name is this metaphor of going from this place of desolate despair to a place of prosperity and self-worth. And that is very different for many people, but we want to help them get there, whatever there is for them. And we need to be moving to that space of helping people, because in the general public, that's what they do. So why not do that for us? And, you know, in our program, I just wanted to highlight a few of the folks that are running through our program thus far. So we have some folks that are literally going to be, you know, we have a future chemical engineer who's going to be looking to get into tissue regeneration. He's literally looking how to rebuild an arm, a leg, brain cells. Like, this guy is a genius, right? We have one of our guys that's looking to be an astrophysicist that's looking to get into MIT. This individual is, I always say that he's going to be the first formerly incarcerated person to walk on Mars. And no one has walked on Mars yet, right? But this individual is going to be the first person to walk on Mars, and he is also a brilliant individual. We have an individual who is looking to be a nurse anesthetist. I can't even pronounce that word, right? And it makes a lot of money, and it's what he wants to do, you know? And we're helping him get there. You know, we have scholars that are actually working on their medical degree. We have scholars that are working on their PhDs from mass spectrometry, yet another word that I don't really know how to say, but we use it in what I do. So I might hire him to come with me selfishly because he's much smarter than me and he can help me advance my research. We have people that are in nursing and psychology and counseling and education, all wanting to pursue higher degree attainment. This is where we need to be moving towards. And I know the question that I've gotten as I'm telling folks about the program, well, it seems like a lot of those professions that you're talking about require certifications. Well, my answer to that is what I did. I'm just gonna break that motherfucking ceiling, is what I'm gonna do. And I'm gonna help others break that ceiling. And we now have the collective power to do that. We now have lawyers. We now have professors. We now have presidents of universities. We have executives. We have psychologists. I was just talking with Chris Beasley and Terrell that are helping run the FIC, the formerly incarcerated college graduates. We have 1,000 folks in there. We have 120 folks who have doctoral and professional degrees. When someone comes and says that one of my scholars, well, we're not going to let you in to be certified as a nurse anesthetist, which he's already certified as a registered nurse. So we're already halfway to that battle, right? But when someone comes and says that we're not going to let them, we're going to utilize this collective force and this collective strength of folks who have already broken the ceiling. Another thing that we're utilizing in this collective force, I have the president of Johns Hopkins on my speed dial, right? The president of the whole university. I'm now having conversations with the dean, and I'm telling him, we have the first formerly incarcerated person that's gonna walk on the moon. We need him at Hopkins. He wants to go to MIT. No, we need him here at Hopkins. And he's like, wow, and when we have these conversations, it almost, it starts off in this space of, well, we're Johns Hopkins though. It's kind of hard to get in here. So when you talk about building this program, Stan, what are we thinking about diluting, the quality of folks that we're bringing in? No. I just told you, man, we got the first person that's gonna walk on Mars. What do you mean are we diluting the quality? This guy's a genius, right? We're not diluting the quality. I need you to help me get him in so he can walk on Mars. And help me break that ceiling too, because you are the president of Johns Hopkins University and you believe in this program and you believe in who I am, right? So why not help other people get into this position? And that's how we break the ceiling. And I'm just about out of time and just about out of slides as well. This goes through some of our vision and our mission and our strategies and our success thus far. Just some things to take away. the ideas of mass incarceration, the stats, the ideas of incarceration has not worked. We need to use education. We need to use some of the strategies that we talked about, those closest to the problem and closest to the solution. We need to be promoting and using our collective leadership and our collective power to promote higher degree attainment and pushing folks into positions of leadership. And I encourage you to connect with me to try and learn more about how we're looking to do this. And with that, I thank you for your time, and I'll take any questions.